So this is going to look at explanations for resistance to social influence. So to start off, these example of sample answer to an exam question that has 4 mistakes in it. So if you can try to identify the mistakes in the answer. So those are the mistakes there. And in terms of resistance to social influence, you should be able to answer questions specifically on social support and locus of control. So 2 explanations for resistance to social influence. You could be asked a more general question where you could talk about both theories, but you might be asked about either of these theories, individually. When it talks about resistance to social influence, you could be talking about resistance to conformity or resistance to obedience. You might be asked specifically, or you might be able to talk about both at the same time. So resistance to social influence are the ways in which individuals will attempt to withstand perceived attempts to threaten freedom of choice. Some examples of resistance to social influence that we've already looked at. So in Ash's conformity study, 2/3 of people didn't conform, so that is resistance. Not all the guards in Zimbardo's prison study conformed to their role, so that is resistance. One of the nurses in Hoefling's study didn't give the injection, so again, that is resistance. 35% of Milgram's 40 participants didn't give the 450 volts, so that again demonstrates resistance. So in the studies, in the research that we've looked at already, we already have examples of resistance to social influence. And if you want to remember any named research, pick the 3 studies that are named. So the 2/3 from the 66% of Ash's participants who didn't conform, the guards in Zimbardo's prison study that didn't conform to their roles, and the 35% of Milgram's participants who didn't give 450 volts. Use those as your examples of resistance from named research. In terms of the role of social support in resisting conformity, the power of the majority comes from its unanimous position. So dissenters are likely to be effective in breaking the unanimity of the majority, raises the possibility that there are other equally legitimate ways of thinking and responding. So if you have a unanimous view, you're likely to get conformity, but the minute you get some social support, so you get a fellow dissenter, someone that is breaking that unanimity, you are likely to get a reduction in conformity. And that was seen in Ash's variations of his experiment. So that is, you're able to see that in the Ash conformity experiment video. Allen and Levine also did an Ash-type replication and found that if it was like Ash and participants had no support, they found 97% conformity. If participants had one supporter with normal vision who gave the correct answers, there was a 36% conformity rate, so a massive drop. And if participants had a supporter with poor vision who wore very thick glasses, there was a 64% conformity. So if it was social support that people could trust, conformity dropped from 97 to 36%. And if it was dubious social support, conformity still dropped from 97 to 64%. A potential issue with much of this research is that researchers are recreating social experiences in controlled environments and often use artificial tasks. Therefore, this might be problematic in terms of applying the research. We can then look at social support and resisting obedience. If individuals are more confident in their ability to resist when they have an ally, so when they've got more social support, and it gives a disobedient model kind of a way out of the situation. One example is a variation of Milgram's study, which is called the 2 peers rebel study, where the first teacher refused to continue and the second teacher withdrew, giving the real teacher kind of an excuse not to obey. So this replication of Milgram supports the view that social support increases resistance. And these are the results from Milgram's 2 peer studies. In terms of evaluating social support, the examiners in the examiners' reports have said that you should link stuff from other topics. So you can talk about social support and locus of control together, and the evaluation for social support, there might be other factors which influence resistance. For example, the role of personality. So you can bring the dispositional explanation of obedience, and you can bring Adorno in here as an evaluation point without having to learn anything new. Okay, here we have some horoscopes. If you would like to, you can read your horoscope. And here are the others. Now, the things to think about are, do you believe what your horoscope says? Do you normally read it? And do you think this might make you more or less obedient? The second explanation of obedience, of resistance, to obedience and conformity is locus of control. There is a questionnaire that you can fill in to determine your locus of control. It's in the appendix of your booklet. And this will give you a measurement of your type of locus of control that you have. People should be able to be put on this continuum, which is where internal locus of control is at one end and external locus of control is at the other end, and you will exist somewhere on this continuum. If you have an internal locus of control, you tend to take responsibility for your own actions. If you have an external locus of control, you tend to let other people take responsibility for your actions. So this was proposed by Rotter, and it refers to the extent which individuals believe they can control events that are happening to them. A locus of control orientation is the belief about whether the outcomes of your actions are to do with ourselves, so that's an internal control orientation, or to do with other people, which is an external control orientation. So it's all about, do you take responsibility for what happens to you, or do you think other people are responsible for what happens? And someone that has an internal locus of control is more likely to resist conformity and obedience because they take personal responsibility for themselves. So they are less likely to move into an agentic state. They are more likely to take responsibility. They're more likely to feel the repercussions of their actions. So according to this theory, if you have an external locus of control, you're more likely to conform or obey. And if you have an internal locus of control, you are less likely to conform or to obey. On page 45 of your booklet, there's some information about people with internal locus control and the fact they're more likely to show resistance to social influence. And on page 46, there is an A01 question that checks your understanding of this. This should take you around 8 minutes to complete. This is the question for that task. So Petra is showing an external locus of control. Dan is showing an internal locus of control. So therefore, Dan is the person that's most likely to resist pressure to conform. And there's an exemplar answer for that question there. Oh, sorry. There is a matching the definitions to the key terms activity here as well that you can do in your booklet. There is then some more supporting research in your booklets, and you can top and tail this evaluation paragraph. So you could say a study which supports the claim that locus of control can influence resistance behavior is, and that would be your top. And the tail might be, this suggests people with an external locus of control more likely to be influenced by social influence than, internals, providing support for the notion that locus of control can explain resistance. In an exam, if you want to write locus of control as LOC, that is absolutely fine. You've also got 2 other evaluation points here, which can have tails added to them. So for Holland's study, this therefore suggests that having an internal locus of control made the participants more likely to show resistance behavior compared to an external locus of control. And for Spector's study, it suggests that personality factors have a limited ability to explain all resistance, suggesting other factors might be considered to explain resistance behavior. Page 48 in your booklet is an example of an assessment question. And it's about Jack and Sarah. This is the mark scheme for the A01 content of that question. This is a mark scheme for the A02, so the application to Jack and Sarah in the STEM. And the mark scheme for A03 for your evaluation.